Hello, this video serves as a behind-the-scenes implementation guide for the Vantage Integrator. We'll cover important points that will facilitate your success in developing the shade widget on your projects. Particularly, we'll briefly touch on what it takes to make the widget appear within the Equinox interface. We will address the integration of serial port-connected third-party shade controllers as well as non-driver-based integration methods provided by Vantage, such as the ILTS and the RTS interpoint for Somfy products, as well as control by relay. Now, please note that in our discussion today, as well as in the Literature and Design Center, we will often be using the term shade and blind interchangeably. Here within Design Center, within our file, we already have created a room structure. And our first objective will be to make sure that we have created the objects to represent each motorized window treatment within this project. If those treatments are controlled by a third-party shade controller that we can interface with, we will insert these objects through the use of a driver. If we view online drivers by category, there is a shade and blinds category holding all of the drivers that we'll be currently looking for. Now, we want to make sure that we are filtering by the reviewed and certified drivers. And we can see here that we have drivers for ESI, for Lutron, for MechoShade, for QMotion, and for Somfy. So if we were to bring these into by dragging and dropping into the project, we would then create the objects that we need. Now, I've already done this, so if we just take a look at some of the instances of these, here is an ESI RQ bridge. We'll see that common to all of these is the need to go down and associate a port. It's either going to be an RS-232 port or it's going to be an RS-45 port. Now, how are we going to know which? Well, that's just the first of many questions that we will need to be able to answer separately for each third-party controller. This is where we begin to see the value of the Equinox integration guide. On the Vantage dealer website, under Resources and Tools and the Document Library, there are integration guides. And here we have developed for your use a reference of each of the Premier partners and the way that they should be implemented. Now, if we were to sort these by order, we will be able to find the one that we're looking for. Once I download that, I'll be able to view it. And here we're able to see information at the top, the manufacturer, model number, the driver, and the Design Center version that it'll work with. Of course, all of these for the shade widget, and then the connection type. Below that, we also have the features that are supported and not supported, both in EQ40 as well as in the full widget 4173 and app world. We have some notes and we have some links to the manufacturer's reference data. We have installation steps. Now, all this is very important to understand. With shade implementation, typically it is the steps of integration that are typically the hardest thing for an integrator to complete. What tech support sees most often is not understanding all of the things that have to be done for that specific third-party controller. So we want you to be aware of that. Now, if we return to Design Center, we see that this root object came with came with child objects, and we can add shades to create more. And we can name each of the blinds that we select, that we add, and we can position them within the area in the project. We'll notice here the orientation and type allow us to select whether the shades are top down, bottom up, left to right, right to left, or if they open out from the center. Also, we can select a multiple of coverings: cell, roller, Roman, Venetian, solar, drapery, and tie-up. And these will then change the representation icon of that blind or shade within the widget. Now, if we don't select anything here and leave it blank, it's going to assume top down and a roller shade. That's what will be assumed if we leave that blank. Now, if we go to a different manufacturer, notice looking at this first one that we have a bridge under ESI and then it has individual blinds. If we look at Mecco, by contrast, they have a different structure. They've got a zone, they've got a group, they've got shades. And we can add zones, we can add groups, and we can add shades, whatever is necessary to match the what is actually on the project. We've also brought in a Q motion, because this is one that actually does support the tilt. And actually, if we come in and this has bridges, and each bridge then has its channels. If we add a channel, we're either going to add a roller channel or a Venetian channel. If you add a Venetian channel, then the tilt left and the tilt right buttons will show up. Otherwise, there will not be tilt buttons, even if we were to select Venetian as the type. That is not what drives it. It's actually the ability to support that's built within the driver as supported by the third-party controller. Now, Vantage does support a few interfaces that don't use third-party drivers. These include 2 stations for Somfy control, the WireLink ILTS station, and the RadioLink RTS interpoint station that will control ILT or RTS blinds respectively. We add objects for these not through drivers but through the Vantage objects under the WireLink for the ILTS and under the RadioLink stations for the interpoint RTS station. So these then are configured as any other Vantage station. Serial number needs to be put in as opposed to a port assignment. In addition to the configuration, of course, we need to set up the blinds to match the physical installation. So we can set up what these blinds are, give them names, their orientation. Interpoint, we can have several of these under one control. We can add those and do the same for them. Now, a final way that we might implement control of motorized window treatments is through relay control, either line voltage or low voltage. If line voltage maintain control, you have the option of using a scene point dual relay, as we have here, available in both WireLink and RadioLink, which acts as a switch replacement and replaces keypad interface at that point. Initially, this object entered into Design Center assumes independent relay control, but if you've selected the shade controller option in the object editor, those loads are no longer presented, and instead there's a new blind object presented viewable under the blind tab of the object editor. Now, if you're using low voltage or you need a pulsed control or would rather have 2 relays in a format other than a scene point, there is a new control that came out with the Shades widget called the Relay Shade. This is an object, again, available under the Shades group. And we bring that in, and then we assign which load opens and which load closes. And I actually have 2 loads here that if I look at them in the enclosure view, they're on a relay module. So I'll look at them back in the area view. So if I want to use those, I can to operate shade, and I use this mechanism then, this object, the relay shade. Select the 2. We time the open and the close duration. That's something you may have to do as well with third party. This allows us to then represent the position of the shade as it opens and closes in a way that is accurate. And an additional parameter that comes with the relay shade is this control type, which can be maintained, pulsed, or reversing polarity, depending on your application. Now, After we've addressed the multiple ways in which we can implement shade control within the Vantage Infusion system, and we've created some representative objects accordingly, let's talk about what it takes to get the shade widget to appear within the Equinox interface environment. Beyond the standard issues of up-to-date firmware in the controller, EQ73 and EQ41, as well as current apps on smartphones and tablets, and the selection within an Equinox profile of visibility of the widget, and within the widget, the shades group, there is an additional subtle nuance that must be acknowledged here. It is that shades appear within the shade widget only within groups. Any shade not included in at least one shade group will not be exposed for control within the widget. And if there are no shade groups created, the widget will not be made available within the Equinox environment. So, with the grouping requirement in mind, let's discuss the idea of groups. Firstly, some third-party controller drivers come with groups, as we've seen, and others do not. So here's one that does not and one that does. If the driver includes groups, those will be exposed as groups within the widget. For all others, it is necessary that we create a group within Design Center. If we go back to the Vantage objects and we go to the Shades category, we see a shade group object. We can drag and drop a group into the area we desire. I'll give you an example one here. We give it its name. We change the shade orientation if that's applicable, and that's probably more likely something that we do individually by shade. And we then select the shades that we want to add to that group. Now we can add and we could take them out to make the adjustments. Now the desire to assign a shade object to multiple groups is supported, so that if you want to control a shade as part of a whole room group, you can add it to that group. If you want it controlled as part of a group representing the shades on a single wall, you can add it to that group. And if you wanted, for example, a group for all south-facing shades on the project, you could create a group and add each of those to that group. When you choose to do this, selecting any group within the widget that includes that individual shade will expose that individual shade for control. Since the introduction of the Shade widget, there has been a release of Design Center that facilitates the scene tray, allowing for a drop-down of scenes within most widgets. You might use this within the Shade widget to program presets that can be manually selected and, if desired, then assigned to timers. You might also program preset tilt positions on tilt controls, just for a couple of examples. Now watch for a video in the near future covering the scene tray, its usage and implementation. This concludes our implementation video for the Shade widget. We hope this helps you succeed in your integration of shades on your Vantage systems. If you have questions, please feel free to contact Vantage Tech Support for assistance, and have a great day.